Welcome to So Many Receipts. I'm Shelley Seddon.
And I'm Fleur Michelle.
And we're two entertainment journos based in Sydney, Australia, who love to analyse and talk about all things reality TV and pop culture.
In Deep Dive, we go all in on stuff we're dying to know about, plus chats you won't want to miss. Today in Deep Dive True Crime, we are taking another look at infamous mushroom murderer Erin Patterson. We've reviewed the two docos and Erin so far, with more to come. And right now I'm talking to Greg Haddrick, author of new book, The Mushroom Murders. It's out now through Allen and Unwin. Greg is a Logie award-winning screenwriter and film and TV producer who has worked on Underbelly, Janet King and Pine Gap. So let's get stuck in. Greg, welcome to So Many Receipts.
Thank you, Fleur. Thank you for inviting me.
So firstly, before we get into the case, you have chosen a bit of an unusual way to tell a true crime story. It's narrated from the point of view of a fictional juror who is female, who works as a picture framer. Why did you decide to do that?
I was mostly interested in creating a book where it's a battle for the mind of the jury, for a juror who thinks that when there is no identifiable motive, it's very difficult to believe the act was intentional.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that you also outlined some of the process that goes into selecting a jury. So the fictional juror explained she's one of 15,000 people in the Latrobe Valley district who gets called up for jury duty, and then it's whittled down, and then it comes to the point of selecting the actual jury. How are people actually chosen?
You cannot know anyone in the family or Erin. You can't know any of the witnesses. You can't know any of the schools that the kids went to, have any connection with them. And so that just whittles it down even further. So you're looking for people from the area, from the local community, who actually have no connection with anything to do with the case. And then on top of that, you have to have an open mind. Almost everyone had heard of the case. It's one thing having had heard of the case. It's another thing already having a very set position. And so anyone who had a very set position, they were asking to not make themselves available either.
So you also have a close relationship with Victoria Police, and that gave you access to details not published in the media. Can you share some of those things with us?
There was a feeling amongst, I'm not sure if it was all, but certainly many of the people covering the trial at the time, that the search had been rather sloppy, because although they were meant to confiscate all the laptops and computers and phones and electronic communication devices from the house, which is standard operating procedure, they missed two laptops. They left two laptops there. And it looked like it had been quite a sloppy job, that in fact they were meant to actually collect all that stuff, and that's what was on the warrant, and they missed a few pieces. And I was pretty sure that that wasn't sloppy. That was quite intentional.
There was also stuff from the trial left out from media reports, because you listened to everything. What didn't they tell us?
For example, everyone knows that, when I say everyone, most people who follow the trial know that she threw the dehydrator out. She took it to the tip on the Wednesday morning.
Yeah, on the CCTV shown to be throwing it out.
And everyone's seen the CCTV of her, throwing it out, etc. What I found when I was sort of talking to people writing the book, what a lot of people hadn't missed or hadn't done, or it hadn't been reported, in great detail, was what had motivated that. And so it's not often, I don't think it was often reported, that morning she had had a long text from the health department the evening, and with lots of questions about where she bought the supposed Asian grocery mushrooms, etc. The evening before, she'd been told that she'd be allowed to keep her kids from child protection, but child protection had said, that's our initial finding. Just to tick the last box, we've got to come and just check the home environment to make sure it's safe for the two kids. So when she got home that evening, and threw the keys on the table, having had a huge day, and the dehydrator that she knew she had used to dry death cap mushrooms was still there, and a child protection officer was coming around the following morning. And it's that context of what to get inside her mind a little bit. It's putting those two things together and realizing that's why she suddenly had to get rid of it.
Mm,
And
mm.
that's why the rush, and that's why she paid for it with a credit card. A lot of things she wasn't thinking through carefully about, how might I be able to do this and not get caught? It was just, I've got to get rid of it because child protection's coming around in 2 hours.
Yeah, you often hear of people, murderers that are found guilty in the end. They often say, well, people say, why did you get rid of that body or whatever it was? And they always say, I panicked.
Yeah,
I just did it because I panicked. But it's not a great reason because it just kind of puts more suspicion on you.
it does. And that's what happened with Erin. It did, because
Mm.
in fact, within 24 hours, the police were looking through her bank records and saw the receipt that she used to throw out the dehydrator.
Yeah.
Um, and so they then got in touch with the Coomera transfer station. They got the CCTV. They saw her do that. They sent one of their detectives down to pick it up.
Mm.
The other little thing that a lot of people I don't think have realised, it's small, but it's interesting, is that in the interview, which is also online, and you can see Detective Eppingstall ask her about, have you ever dehydrated food? And she says, no, never, never, never. The dehydrator was in the next room. They already had it.
Yep.
So it's little
Right.
things like that that you
Mm.
go. So as he's asking that question, not only was she caught in a lie they found out later, they already knew
Mm.
she had a dehydrator because they already had it.
And it was a revelation to me, even that there was such a thing called a dehydrator. I had no idea people wanted to dehydrate
Yeah.
food. I've never ever heard of somebody doing that. I don't know any friend. I don't know anybody personally that's ever bought one. So I
And
thought that was
that's right.
interesting.
And she bought it an hour, 2 hours after her phone records indicate strongly that she had gone to the Lock Reserve, which was one of the only areas.
Oh, oh, I did not know that.
Yeah.
That is
So what happened?
extremely interesting and
Yeah.
suspicious.
So,
Yeah.
so what happened was Christine McKenzie posted on iNaturalist on April the 18th that year, April 2020, that she'd found death cap mushrooms in Lock Reserve. Now,
Mm,
she posted that to say, beware, beware, warning, warning, don't go near, don't pick them, don't take your dog there, etc.
right.
Um, on the and the police asked the phone expert, Dr. Matthew Sorrell, are there any days where it looks like there's Erin's phone had travelled, to that area?
Hmm.
The one which is by far the most likely and most consistent with her phone and therefore Erin herself having travelled to Lock Reserve is the morning of April 28, 10 days later. So
Hmm.
the prosecution's claim is she Googled iNaturalist and they knew she knew of iNaturalist because it had been Googled earlier. She went to Lock Reserve that morning. And the added reason why that they say it looks highly suspicious is because rather than going straight home, having stayed nearly an hour at Lock Reserve, the only place where death cap mushrooms had been reported at that point in time, she
Mm.
goes to the Better Home store rather than go home and buys a food dehydrator.
And you were just on Gary Jubilin's great crime podcast, I Catch Killers, and you talked about Erin's aptitude for deception, like when she switched her phone during a search of her Leongatha home in August 2023, which is something I also didn't know. Can you tell us about more about what she did?
Yeah, so she had a phone which they called it during the trial, Phone A. So she had a Samsung phone which she'd used all year through 2023. So if, for example, she had been searching on her phone, the iNaturalist site, to find out if there'd been any sightings of death cap mushrooms, she would have done it on that phone A.
Hmm.
Any other photos, etc., that she might have taken, if she didn't put them in her shared cloud folder, they'd be on that phone. So after the lunch and after people died and after she realised that within a day the medical community had figured out that it was death cap mushrooms that had probably poisoned this, what seems to have happened is she'd started to think, I'm not sure I want the police to grab this phone because it's got so much stuff on it. This is if we, assuming, taking the fact that she's guilty. And I think it sort of feeds into that whole fact. So she found another phone. She initially put a different number in it. So she'd got a SIM card out of her tablet, which had ended in a different number, 835, and she put that in a different Samsung phone. And her explanation at the trial was, I wanted to change my phone number so that Simon couldn't keep hassling me. And you go, well, you could have just put the SIM in your normal phone.
Mm.
You've got to do that. You didn't have to create a whole new phone for it. But she did. And then she put all her normal apps on that phone. And at some point during the search, and she was still using her phone A, and she said phone A was broken, the screen was broken, I needed a new phone. And the prosecution was saying, well, look at your Telstra data records. You're still using it for texting, for calling people, for answering calls. You're doing everything on it. It's performing like a rock star. But when the police arrived and gave her a surprise, the first thing she did was think through, and the police are with her, like that she has there's 5 police doing the search. One of them is staying with her at all times, walking around the house with her. So she has 2 phones. She's got phone A, which has all the search history on it, and that finishes in the number that everyone knows. She has phone B that she's just put all her apps on with a different number. The first thing she does while the police are searching her house is factory reset that second phone to wipe it of all its apps. Next thing she does is take the SIM card, 783 SIM, out of phone A that has all the search history on it and puts it somewhere. There's a lot of debate where it was put, but the short thing is it was never found. So the phone with all the search history on it is never found. When the police at the end of the search say, can you hand over your phone, please? She hands over the phone that she's just factory reset, just put a SIM in, and has only used once in the last 24 hours and has never used before that. And that phone is the phone that the police think is her real phone. They don't know that she's ditched phone A and put a different SIM in this phone.
Yeah.
All while a police search is going on.
Yeah.
And her explanation for all of this is, I thought I needed to change a number so that Simon couldn't contact me, even though Simon had stopped calling her a couple of days beforehand. And then if you follow that through, at 1 o'clock, and we know from phone records that the 783, her main number, the SIM card, was taken out of the phone between 12 o'clock and 1:40 in the middle of that search. And then at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, that the cops take that phone away, which they think is her normal phone, and it goes into a safe in police headquarters in Spencer Street in Victoria. At 5, she's then factory reset that second phone. Then at 1 o'clock in the morning, 1:14, she puts the first SIM from her real number in a different phone again, in the Nokia phone, and now claims she's not going to change her phone number. She needs to Simon should stay in contact with the kids. So the whole excuse is ditched within 24 hours. And she has her original SIM in a completely different phone that has no search history on it. And then at 5 o'clock in the morning, she does a search of her devices on that Nokia phone and realizes that the cops who took her other phone hadn't turned it off, and it's still connected to the internet. So at 5 o'clock, she does a remote factory reset again from her bedroom in Leongatha to the phone which is in homicide headquarters. Even though it achieved nothing because she'd already factory reset it once, she was so nervous it would have seemed that she'd left something or missed something, etc. She created another factory reset on a phone that had nothing on it, and the phone that did have the search history on it has never been found.
Why would cops not take her phone off her when they got to her house, or not keep an eye on her?
It's partly, I think, because she asked later on, to call a lawyer. She is allowed to have access to a lawyer, etc. And so I believe that's part of it. They never went in thinking this was going to happen. People just keep their phones there. They didn't know that she had, 2 other phones. And so I think they tend to, she might have even shown it to them. I don't know the full details there. But effectively, they made a list of everything they found, and then at the end started bagging everything and taking everything.
Given she was very much into true crime cases and was on Facebook crime forums, why do you think she left such an obvious trail of evidence? If she's smart and she's thinking under pressure, she was also quite sloppy in a lot of other ways.
She never expected them to find out that death cap mushrooms were the cause of everyone being sick at that much. And because she thought that the medical community would never discover that, she felt she didn't have to go to all the lengths. Even it's subconsciously rather than consciously, she didn't feel she had to go to all those lengths to cover herself. That only happened 2 days after.
But why would she think they wouldn't find out? They would find the toxins in the bodies, right?
Well, what was revealed 4 weeks after the trial, and this is the epilogue in the book, the stories of the 3 attempted murders of Simon, which happened the year before. So, and the evidence, and those charges were dropped the day before the court case began. In all 3 of those occasions, the medicos could not identify what was causing Simon's ill health. So the answer to your question, and it was mine too at one point, of how on earth did Erin ever think she would get away with poisoning people with death cap mushrooms, was she already had 3 times.
Oh, well, that's interesting because I read that there was a theory that he had been poisoned with antifreeze, which was untraceable.
But it's a theory. No one knows what he was poisoned with.
Okay.
All we know is whatever he was poisoned with, they'd never uncovered what it was. She had poisoned someone 3 times in a row and
Hmm.
had never got in trouble for it, and the finger had never been pointed at her. So in my mind, I'm thinking she just thought she could do it again.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that before, that maybe he had been poisoned with the mushrooms as well. It's just that maybe it was a lower level or whatever. She had cooked them differently. And so maybe that gave her the confidence to go ahead with poisoning these other 3 people with the mushrooms. That actually makes sense now. And you've also said, I read that at the beginning, the public was convinced that Erin Patterson was guilty of deliberately murdering her in-laws. But as the trial continued, genuine doubt arose it may have been a dreadful accident after all. What were some of the doubts?
It's partly her explanation, which was it was all a tragic accident, does make sense for a lot of the time. And so even when you think about buying a sunbeam food dehydrator, she had foraged mushrooms for 2 or 3 years. She was foraging mushrooms again. She ate a lot of them.
Hmm.
There's a perfectly innocent explanation to that. She was using it to dehydrate what she thought were edible mushrooms. The fact she picked up death caps, Erin had always said through the trial, was a complete accident. She didn't know she'd done that. So she kept on saying, look I love Don and Gail, and my kids love Don and Gail. And one of the reasons why I'm putting forward and I'm wanting you to believe that there's an innocent explanation to all of this is there's no reason why I would do this.
Hmm.
And that became there was a point in time where that became quite convincing. Her explanation makes perfect sense when you can't identify a motive.
Hmm.
And quite, in fact, the opposite of not identifying a motive, she actively apparently had a good relationship with them.
I mean, we've seen people like Lindy Chamberlain and Joanne Lees and Catherine Folbig all thrown under the bus and then exonerated. I mean, is there a chance that Erin Patterson's innocent?
Um, I don't think so. For me, as you probably know, she fed the leftovers to her kids on a Sunday night.
Hmm. And
So,
said she scraped the mushrooms off their bit.
yes, but remember, she's also claiming that she had diarrhea for the 24 hours previous. She knew that the 4 other people at that lunch were in hospital on IV drips. So, the fact that it was that lunch which had caused her to be sick and caused the other 4 to be sick was beyond doubt. There was no other
Mm.
reason why all 5 of them would have the same symptoms of diarrhea and be in hospital. So you have a lunch meal which has caused everyone there to be sick. As a parent, would you then feed the leftovers of that meal to your children?
Mm.
And when you're claiming that you've had the runs all day and all Saturday night, and you knew that you would only have had that from that lunch because you hadn't anything else, and you knew that it put the 4 other guests in hospital. Now, if you're innocent, I think it's not just against good parenting, it's against, to me, human nature. If
Mm.
you eat something and you know that that lunch had made you sick, you get rid of it. You don't go back to that restaurant. You never order that again.
Mm.
That's your reaction to it. It's not, oh, well, I'll just feed it to the kids. So the answer, and I came to this point, I'm sure the jury did too, which is why they found her guilty. The only way that makes sense is if she knew it was perfectly safe to feed it to the kids. And the only
Mm.
way that she would know it was perfectly safe to feed that to the kids is if she knew which Wellingtons had poison and which ones didn't.
Yep. So, what is your theory as to why she committed this crime? Why do you think she poisoned her in-laws? Why do you think she attempted to poison Simon and wanted him at the lunch too?
Look, and I think I don't have a great answer to that. In fact, there's lots of speculation, and I could speculate down two or three parts.
Hmm.
Um,
Because you
and I-
say in the book, or the juror says, I'm not sure, I don't know what the motive is.
yeah, the juror says I don't know,
Hmm.
and I'm not. And at the end of the day, the prosecution said they don't know.
Hmm.
And right from the beginning, the judge said the prosecution doesn't have to prove motive. Erin's very difficult to understand why. It's a combination of who knows. Like, you can go down the path of um, a narcissist who just felt that that family was slowly losing its contact with her, and it was the only one she belonged to, and she was really irritated and annoyed, and it was a hatred that the one family that she'd spent so much time feeling a part of was now trying to cut her loose. You could go down that path, but the
Hmm.
evidence shaky. You could go down the path of the one she was really angry with was Simon, and he never turned up to the lunch, but she was still wanting to hurt him, and this was a way of doing it.
Hmm.
Bring in things like during the sentencing pleas, she was saying that she'd been diagnosed as somewhere on the spectrum of autism, and that there was a sort of uh, some element of limited psychology there that would allow someone to do something where she didn't feel emotion.
Hmm.
There are several different paths you can go down, but who knows what the real one is.
Because you say in the book, you point out that she was getting, and we read this as well in articles, that she was getting more and more irritated with Simon about the financials of their life together and arguing about money and children, money to do with children and, you know,
Yeah.
ATO matters and all sorts of things. So is there not a theory, even if I'm playing armchair detective and you can tell me
Yeah.
what you think, that she got so irritated with him about these money issues and felt that he was so controlling. And I think there was issues of, was there mention of coercive control and all of that?
Well, she mentioned that, but
She mentioned that.
those sort of things you got to take. Yeah, you either take Erin at her word or you don't.
Yeah.
And
So she got more and more irritated with this money situation with Simon. So she just wanted to do away with him in the end. She got so irritated and she wanted to do away with the in-laws because they were too much in his ear, too much supporting him and not backing her side of things as well. What do you think of all that?
the problem is the three attempted murder charges on Simon all happened before that blow up.
Mm-hmm.
So the three attempted murder charges date from about April, May 2022, June, July 2022, September 2022. It's then not a big surprise that come October, Simon is putting "I'm separated" on my tax return, considering she's tried to kill him three times. And it's after he does that, and that brings in child support payments, which previously they'd worked out amongst themselves. The fact he put that on his, and she went for the family tax benefit, meant that child protection in state government came into play. And all of a sudden, he was asked to, they would actually be the referees, and they would decide how much money he had to pay in child support, and he wasn't to pay medical bills and school fees that she just asked him to pay. It had to go through them.
Okay, well, maybe I'll strip it back to maybe she just didn't like him.
Well,
And that was the original thing. And the like became even more intense once all the money worries started, the money issue started up. Because, yeah,
oh,
I mean,
it definitely did get more intense. Like there's and that's when she was, on the venting to her friends on Facebook. That all happened in that December 2022 period when there was the
mm,
wild over, the money situation. And it wasn't, it was more Simon's behavior. You're right. That's what she was getting upset about because neither of them are really financially struggling. So it
yeah.
was more about what she thought was fair and how Simon's behavior.
Yeah, because she wasn't very complimentary about him,
No,
ever in
no,
what we saw anyway.
until that point. Like
Mm,
before then, she was busy saying, there's a lot of evidence that both Simon and she gave, and also Simon's siblings at the trial, where they're going, even though they were separated as husband and wife, they got on quite well together. They went on family holidays together.
hmm.
Um, they would often talk together. They'd go on walks together. They just said they couldn't live together. And that had been the situation from 2015 through to early 2022. And then something had changed then. I don't
Mm.
know. which had and I don't know what, because the evidence dries up a little bit there, because it would have been for the attempted murders and they had to drop the attempted murders. And then the big blow up with Simon happens in December of 2022. And then she claims, and there is some evidence from her texts between, even with Don and Gail, that she fires up and then she forgives, and that happened again, and that intense venting she had with her Facebook friends when she's saying, fuck them and all this sort of stuff. She calmed down by January, February, and she's pretending then that it was all fine with the family except Simon. And both Simon and she say they really never had the same relationship again after that December 22 period. But then she asks him to lunch in June, and he says, no, I'm too uncomfortable to come. And she asks him to lunch again in July 29, when he said again, I'm too uncomfortable to come. And the question at the trial was never asked, why are you too uncomfortable? And they couldn't ask that question because the answer, I think she tried to poison me 3 times last year. They couldn't open that. They couldn't go there. So for the jurors listening to the evidence, they're scratching their head going, why was he too uncomfortable to go to lunch? So that's it. There's a lot of detail in how their relationship sort of broke down, which is both presented at trial and interesting, but there's also a lot which is missing, and we don't know.
Yeah, because she's not never going to tell anybody, but it'd be fascinating to look inside her head, because you put up theories of, oh, well, maybe she didn't like him very much, or there was financial issues or whatever, but they don't seem very strong. Like, people have killed husbands for much worse than that. It's okay, maybe she wasn't madly in love with him anymore, or he was irritating about the money, but it's just that it feels like she was just irritated. It just seems so extreme.
Yes, that's right. It's one thing being irritated and doing something in the heat of the moment, or at least getting a build-up of anger over a few days and then exploding. Having done that, you remember she calmed down, took the kids out of the school they were in and put them in a new school, which she threatened, and then started planning something for 5 months. This was a carefully laid plan from April through to July. So it was the heat of passion had gone out of it. I mean, the heat had, the passion hadn't, obviously, because she went through with it. But but this is why it's a conundrum, and it's a fascinating conundrum. And and the fascinating conundrum, I think this buys into why the case is so interesting to so many people everywhere, is if it was a fascinating conundrum from a known criminal family is one thing. But when you're a mum of 2 kids, living a quiet middle-class life in a country town with a goat and a dog and some lambs, no criminal background, no criminal record at all, no violence in her family background at all, you think, where the hell did this come from?
Wow, you'd just love to know, wouldn't you? It's just so interesting. So we've done several videos on Erin on the So Many Receipts TikTok page. Some of the posts have got, well over 100,000 views, because people are everyone wants to have an opinion and a say on this. And on one of the videos, something which many people theorized about was, why did Simon and Don never really raise any suspicions about her trying to possibly poison Simon? And people theorized, well, I think it was because they were a very religious family, and at the end of the day, maybe they just believed that God would take care of them. Did you ever feel that as to why they didn't say anything?
You mean before the lunch? At what point are we talking?
Talking about when Simon told Don, his dad, that he thought Erin was trying to poison him. And I think there was something where Don said, oh, let's not make a big deal about it. You don't know that for sure. Just don't worry about it, and we'll be right. We'll go to this lunch. We'll be okay.
That was never part of the evidence at trial. So
Okay.
I don't know that conversation ever happened.
Oh, okay. Well, that was quite widely reported. And I think a lot of people,
the jury did not know that that conversation ever happened.
Mm.
Uh,
Okay. Do you
that
have
was
an opinion on it as to their religious kind of
Look,
fervor or their I think a lot of people if we just kind of take that out of that if it's not, completely accurate, I think a lot of people thought that this family were all extremely too trusting. Did you have a
look. I
feeling of
think I
that?
think that's true. I think Don and Gail, um, just assume we live in a world where that conversation had happened, and as I said, it wasn't part of the trial evidence. So um, that's not to say it didn't. It's just to say that
Mm.
I don't know that it did. If it had, what you're saying probably makes a bit of sense. It's now in hindsight we know what she did. It looks very strange that no one picked up the signs.
Mm.
If you can live in a world where you go back in time, even though Simon had been very sick 3 times during that year, there's nothing in Erin's background to suggest she would do something that dramatic.
Mm.
She's never displayed any violence at all. She's occasionally quick to be offended by things and will be snappy and then will apologize for being snappy. And you go, well, that defines about, 40% of the human race or 60% of the human race. The leap from that to thinking, you had actively tried to kill someone is massive for someone who didn't have anything like that in their background at all.
Mm.
And who, for the previous, from January, when Don and Gail reached out to repair the relationship with Erin, they got quite close to her and quite close to the kids.
Mm.
And, he was busy building a rocket with the son. They were worried about Erin's health because Erin was saying that, she had a biopsy and a lump on her elbow, and they were exchanging several texts about that. So I think in their mind, if Erin had been, I think they would have found it almost impossible to believe. And in fact, I think that's one of the reasons why, they were quite happy to go and why Simon was happy for them to go to the lunch. In the end, a lot of people also say, if he thought that she tried to kill him 3 times, why did he let his parents go to lunch?
Mm.
And I think part of the answer is he wasn't entirely, at that point in time, until the lunch itself, wasn't entirely convinced and 100% sure that was the case. And secondly, I don't think it crossed his mind for a second that Erin would have any beef against his parents and his children's grandparents.
Mm.
Just did not enter their thoughts.
Yeah, because I think I raised in one of our TikToks, why would he let his parents go? And we had several people saying it's so hard to think that someone who seemed reasonably normal would actually be trying to kill you the whole
Yeah,
time by poison.
yeah.
It is the stuff of movies. It's
It-
so hard to wrap your head around it. Why would anybody really come to that conclusion?
And they wouldn't. I think that's true. Now we know the facts of that lunch. You think in hindsight, well, all the signs were there. But at the
Mm.
time, I think you would not let yourself even. It's not as though you would have entertained the thought and then thought, no, that doesn't make sense. I don't think you would have got to the point of even entertaining it because
Yeah.
you're dealing with, as I said, normal suburban middle class mum taking the kids to school and picking them up every day.
Mm.
It's like this isn't part of the normal world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they never thought for a second that this was going to happen.
Mm. Yeah, I think until you're actually in those in that position, in those unfortunate shoes, you just can't sort of you can't really wrap your head around what you as an individual might have thought about this woman that was part of your family for so many years. Okay, probably a little bit funny or a bit of an odd bod, but nothing extreme. I,
No,
you know,
no. And she'd been really nice to them for the previous
yeah.
6 months. And kids had gone over there to stay. So, and I can imagine Simon not 100% sure. Can't speak for Simon. I've never, talked to him, and I
Mm.
didn't go down that path because my juror could never talk to him. So, they had to come to a decision without being able to interact with anyone else. So
Mm.
that was the position I was coming from. But I can imagine why he was feeling uncomfortable. I can also imagine why, if he was going to mention it, if that conversation did happen prior to the lunch, I know there was one after, but if there was one prior to the lunch, um, it would be tentative because it would not seem, even though he'd be thinking of the experience of the previous year, he would know that that hasn't been his parents' experience with Erin at all. So it would not gel.
Mm. Mm. So the latest news is that Victoria's top prosecutors are now appealing for a harsher penalty than the 33-year non-parole period. And meanwhile, Erin's got a new legal team and wants to appeal against her conviction to downgrade it. What do you see happening next for her?
Well, those appeals will be fascinating. And I haven't, that last bit about the defense appeal, I haven't actually followed that in great detail. So what you're saying is they're not appealing the conviction itself, they're appealing the severity of the sentence.
Yeah, she wants it lessened, and the prosecutors want it upped and don't think she should have the non-parole period. I guess just life imprisonment without parole.
They do. And the reason they're thinking, and I believe the reason they're thinking that is um, it was at the very grave end of offending, as her first defence barrister actually conceded, that she had gone to the meticulous lengths of planning horrific murders of three people, then gone to significant lengths to try and disguise and hide her guilt in that, and then had shown absolutely no remorse for any of them at all.
Mm.
Putting all of that together, absolutely no remorse, the extent of the offending of killing three people and nearly killing a fourth, and the time and effort went into planning and executing that. Where are the extenuating circumstances for a non-parole period? It's difficult to see. So I can see the DPP's point there. I think she's got a tough ask to ask for a lesser sentence.
Mm.
I wouldn't. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just going off just gut feel, but a 33-year non-parole sentence is not an insignificant deprivation of liberty.
And she will be 82 if she lasts that
82,
long.
yeah, that seemed to be fair to me as a
Yeah.
punter. As a punter,
Yeah,
but
me too, actually.
yeah.
Okay. And finally, Greg, as you are a screenwriter, are you hoping your book will be optioned around? I think telling the story from the point of view from a juror is pretty clever. It's a good idea for TV.
It is a good idea for TV. Well, that actually was not the prime. No, it really wasn't, because I had to compartmentalize things and make the book as good as it could be first. And but I was not totally oblivious to the fact that it would be a good adaptation, and it would be a good way to adapt a story which might otherwise, depending on how your in point to the story is. We already know that the ABC are in development with one show. There could well be others. It's the people in the screen industry know me and know what I can do and know my true crime record. And yes, I have retained the option to the screenwrites, etc. So very happy to have chats about adapting it if anyone is interested in doing so. And all I'll say about that take in the book is it protects you against a lot of legal issues.
Mm,
Um,
okay.
yeah, a lot of legal issues would arise if you were trying to tell the real story of Simon and Erin's relationship, for
Mm,
example, because then you would have to dramatize a lot of scenes that weren't presented at trial between Simon and Erin. A lot of the ones which were presented unemotionally, where you go, well, that was a blow up, but it's not presented that way at trial. So in my adaptation, the main emotional roller coaster ride is from the fictional juror,
mm.
who's just looking at what was presented and
And
getting frustrated by that.
yeah, I don't think the viewer appreciates that. Sometimes you see things where it's fictionalized scenes between people behind the scenes. How do we know what happened?
How
How
do we
does
know?
anyone know?
I'm here waving a flag saying, if my book is adapted as a screen version, it would take a different access point
Hmm.
and avoid a lot of those legal issues.
Well, Greg, it's been so interesting chatting to you about this endlessly intriguing case. Thank you so much for coming on So Many Receipts for our deep dive true crime series.
Thank you, Flo. Really appreciate it, and it was a great pleasure being here.
And The Mushroom Murders by Greg Haddrick is out now through Allen and Unwin.